Hey everybody, welcome to chapter 5. This is on leadership and followership. So a couple of underlying concepts before we get into leadership styles and things like that. The first is ethics, right? And we tend to think of ethics as just doing what's right, or how we know what is right and what isn't right. And so here's some basics of ethics. Ethics are a system of moral principles that guide the conduct of an individual, group, or society. Okay, and so when we talk about someone having character, we're usually meaning that they have ethical values. And so that's just like a basic underlying, I guess, concept. And then, they give you 3 ideas for just being everyday ethical. The first is be people oriented, understand how what you do impacts other people, and then try to act appropriately, knowing that, right? Second is choose your values and then hold to them. For me, I have to kind of think ahead of how I'll respond to specific situations, and then based on my values, and then it's pretty easy for me to know what's right or wrong when faced with a problem. And finally, we motivate others to serve for more than just themselves. So to meet the group's needs and even a broader group. If we kind of stick with that, then regardless of the ethical philosophy we're talking about, we have a better chance of beating. The second concept is delegation, which simply means giving jobs to our employees and then giving them the ability to do those things. So again, the definition here is the process of entrusting duties and related authority to subordinates. And these 3 steps are really good. Number one, assign the duties to the subordinate. 2 is you grant permission to do the job, to make commitments, use resources, and take the actions necessary to perform the duties. And 3, create an obligation for the employee to do it right, to do it satisfactorily. And so we probably all worked for somebody who does 2 of those 3. They make the assignment and they create an obligation, but then they don't give us the tools and resources we need, or they give the assignment and they give you permission, but they don't really create the obligation. And so while you're working hard, your coworkers who also have tasks aren't fulfilling it, or whatever, right? So those 3 are really important. And so that's what delegation is, and you've got to learn to be better at it. It's actually an area of personal weakness for me. I tend to not always be trusting. And so this first bullet point, the shortage of qualified employees, the they can't do it mentality. Sometimes I fall into that, and it actually harms my ability to be a good supervisor. Or I'd rather do it myself. Like, it's just a hassle to have to explain it to someone, so I'm just going to take care of it. So these are dangerous ways of thinking that usually will harm your ability to be a good manager or supervisor. And of course, the advantages are that you have people who are developing and growing in their capacity to do work. For one, it helps you be prepared to be promoted because now you have someone else who can take over your job. But even beside that, it also can take some of the burden off of you as a manager, because you don't have to do everything, right? It can be spread out. Anyway, so let's talk about leadership styles. So there's a couple of different ideas surrounding leadership styles, but I want you to look at that blue box in the middle. And so it says employee involvement in decision making, and then leadership control. So we'll see, we can kind of run a continuum from on the far left, where it's free reign, meaning the employees make all the decisions and the leader doesn't control things at all, up to participative, where there's a balance between employee involvement and leader control, all the way to the far right, autocratic, where there's no employee involvement in decision making and the leaders are completely in control. To be honest, most people would prefer to be in a participative environment. They want to be involved in decision making, but they want the leader to have appropriate control as the leader. And so giving people either too much freedom is usually not good, or no freedom or too little freedom is. And so finding a balance that's appropriate for your workplace and for the people you're supervising. It may be different if you're supervising a bunch of high school age workers. as opposed to, say a department head here at the college who supervises a bunch of people with advanced degrees and years of experience who we can allow much more free reign. There's also, a couple of other theories involved, but they're similar. So theory Y is more this mindset that employees like working and like making their own decisions, and so we're going to treat them that way. And theory X is this idea that like most employees don't like work, and so we have to exercise more control. So it kind of fits on that same continuum. And then leader behavior, supportive leaders versus directive leaders, same idea. Supportive leaders sort of stand back and say, hey, I trust you guys, I'm just here to help, and I'll help in whatever way I can and provide you the tools you need to be successful, all the way up to directive leaders who say, nope, I'm going to make sure everything's done the way it should. These are continuums, and finding balance is a matter of understanding the needs of the workplace and the needs of the people, and getting over your own ego a little bit. So some advantages of participative management or general supervision style is that, it frees you up as a supervisor from all the details. So you can do more planning and controlling and organizing and let the people do their job. It also gives confidence, like we mentioned before, so that people grow. And the employees often make the best decisions because they're the ones who do the job and understand the details. For employees, they have a chance to develop. They can grow and learn from the mistakes and from their successes. It allows people to take pride in their decisions. It usually just makes people more eager to be at work and more likely to advance or be promoted. So the other side of the coin from leadership is followership, right? And so here's the definition they give. And it's a pretty good definition, right? How willing are we to follow someone else? So a good follower is self-managing, committed to the organizational goals, even sometimes being able to willing to put those ahead of their own roles, competent at their job, and that they're ethical. And so those are good followers. You notice it doesn't say that they just follow blindly, right? In other words, sometimes good followers may have to speak up and say, I'm not sure I understand this, or I'm not sure I think this is the best thing. Can I share a perspective? But they do have to be able to take care of things and do their job. That's an important part of being a good follower. Here's a kind of a continuum or a matrix of followership style. You'll see on the x-axis, we go from passive to active. So a passive follower just sort of does whatever they're told, but doesn't really think or do more, right? All the way over to active followers who are trying earnestly to be involved in their following. In other words, you don't just follow passively, you follow with a purpose. And then on the y-axis, we go from dependent and unable to do any critical thinking all the way up to independent. And so if you have a person who's passive and dependent, they're called a passive follower. Those people, if that's their personality, they usually do best if we can just give them direct orders, and then correct them when needed. If someone is dependent but active, they're called conformists. It means they will jump in and do whatever the boss says, and sort of adjust what they're doing, not just passively, but with purpose. If somebody is independent and passive, those are the hard ones, because we call those alienated followers. It means they're always frustrated and feel like they're being told what to do, but they're not actively doing anything about making that better. And so what we're hoping for are people who are independent and active, and they're going to be what we call exemplary followers, people who really are kind of leaders in their own right, but recognize their position as followers, and so follow when it's appropriate and lead and work independently when that's what's appropriate. And that's our hope. Anyway, so that's kind of a summary of the two concepts of the chapter, leadership and followership. As always, if you need help as you're going through things, don't be afraid to reach out, and I hope you have a great week.